First, the fish needs to say, something ain't right about this camel ride, and I'm feeling so damn thirsty.
Nice.
Hello again, and welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, and today we're trying something new, hopefully for the first time of many. Today we're diving into the Pixar theory, specifically my own new and original addition to it, where I have attempted to uncover exactly who the original owner of Woody really was, before he was given to a young Andy Davis. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into this together. I apologize for my bad lighting today. My light is broken, so we're back to this, but we crack on.
I'm very sorry, and I apologize.
Have you ever wondered where Andy's Woody doll came from? The broadly accepted theory is that his father potentially gave it to him originally, which is a perfectly fine explanation, but one that I find ultimately unconvincing. For one, if he was from Andy's father, you'd think that that would have been explicitly stated at some point during the series, what with how often either Andy or his mom reference Woody. Especially with that father permanently out of the picture for some reason, you'd think that that aspect of Woody's origin would become even more important to Andy, rather than something that's never mentioned. Therefore, even though it is totally possible that Andy simply got the Woody doll from his dad, and it does somewhat fit with Andy's mom referring to Woody as an old family toy in Toy Story 2, I still find it unlikely that his dad was involved. For one thing, if he had been given to Andy by his dad specifically, isn't that what his mom would have said? He got that as a gift from his father, rather than that's an old family toy.
I'm sorry, it's an old family toy.
I just wanted to address the Andy's dad possibility right off the bat, as while it's certainly possible, I find it highly unlikely given the lack of any specific evidence pointing to it being the case. And so for the purposes of this theory video, we are going to assume that Andy's absent father had absolutely nothing to do with Andy being given his Woody doll. Now, in Pixar canon, we all know that the Woody doll line from whence our beloved Woody doll... I'm saying it a lot. We all know that the Woody doll line from whence our beloved Woody came was manufactured in the late 1950s to tie in with the popular TV show of the time, Woody's Roundup. In Toy Story 2, along with that information, we also learn that the Woody doll that Andy owns is an extremely rare find for a toy collector and seller like Al, as he proclaims that it is the only mint-condition Woody he's ever come across in all his years of searching to complete his set, thus making him desperate to buy it off of Andy's mom. Woody dolls then must be pretty scarce in general, and even scarcer when considering what good condition our Woody is in. So then the question becomes, how does Andy, a little boy in the mid-1990s, own a mint-condition, vintage collectible Woody's Roundup TV show replica doll? How did he come into possession of this phenomenally rare and expensive piece of TV and toy history? He could have been given it by one of his two parents, but we've already ruled out his dad for the purposes of this video, and as for his mother, why would she choose to specifically go out of her way to give her son a rare and expensive vintage toy to roughhouse with all the livelong day to his heart's content? In fact, in Toy Story 2, when talking to Al, as I mentioned before, she seems fully unaware of how much a Woody doll could be worth, seeming to only care that it is Andy's favorite toy and referring to it as an old family toy, as I've earlier mentioned. I wrote a whole bit about her having, if she bought it then she would know how expensive it was, but that was before I then looked at the clip again and she says old family toy, so I'll just skip past that bit. Another thought is that Woody could have been passed down to Andy through either his mother or father's family, which is perfectly plausible and does line up much better with how Andy's mom actually refers to Woody, but then even accepting that as the truth, or at least a very likely possibility, it doesn't actually answer the question of who specifically Woody's original owner was within Andy's extended family. The question of who exactly originally might have bought him some 30 plus years before he was eventually given to Andy. Judging by the good condition that Woody is in, he had to have belonged to someone that takes particularly good care of their possessions, and potentially wasn't even a child when they originally purchased the Woody themselves. Can you think of any other notable Pixar characters that would have been alive in the 1950s to purchase an original Woody at the time of manufacturing that would have lived long enough to give it to a young Andy?
A clue? You see a clue? Where?
Let me take you through the timeline of the relevant movies and show you how I came to the conclusion of who Woody's original owner truly was. First, let's go through a few of the options that I considered bringing up, a few of the movies that could have connected because their time period is sort of matching up with the time period we're considering Woody to have been bought in, the 1950s. Ratatouille potentially takes place around the 1950s, 60s in France. I'm not sure exactly when it's set, and I don't want to look it up right now because I've got the camera rolling, but it's possible that it's kind of in that time period and that one of those characters in that film could have owned the Woody doll, but it's set in France, so I don't see any connection. There's no Easter egg connection at all. There's no evidence at all that these characters could have known the Davises. And so we're going to rule out Ratatouille. Luca, same kind of thing. Set in a different country, Italy, and it's kind of the same time period, but more the 1960s and the 1950s. I believe, and so it's a little bit after, and again, they're all kids, and I don't think that any of them are going to be taking great care of their toys. And yeah, there's no Easter egg evidence there either. And then the third possibility is the Incredibles movies, anybody in the Incredibles movies, especially the Parr family themselves, but for one thing, yeah, even though they're in America, that's a decent option and in kind of the time period, so one of the other supers even, or Bob himself or Helen herself could potentially own the doll because they were adults at that time and they could have gotten it for one of the kids. Their entire house and all of their possessions get blown up at the end, so if they had owned that Woody doll, he would have gone up in smoke. Maybe they did own a Woody doll that got burned. But yeah, I don't believe that anybody in the Parr family owned Woody, and also, again, there's no Easter egg evidence. So now let's get into the relevant films, starting with Toy Story.
Need to repair my turbo boosters. Do people still use fossil fuels, or have you discovered crystallic fusion?
In the original Toy Story from 1995, great year, we are introduced to Woody, the main protagonist of the series. We purposely are given very little information about the Woody doll itself, instead just being told that he is an old favorite toy of Andy's, in sharp contrast to the brand new and exciting, ultra-hyped, and just then released Buzz Lightyear action figure. From the information given in the first film, there's very little we can surmise about Woody's origins, beyond him having belonged to Andy for quite some time, being his special favorite toy before Buzz arrives, and probably not exactly being a brand new toy even when given to Andy in the first place. Moving on. Toy Story 2.
Why would someone steal Woody?
In the first sequel, things start to become a lot more clear regarding the origins of Woody. Al McWiggin, yes, that's his real name, I looked it up. I'd never known that before. The owner of Al's Toy Barn shows up at the yard sale being held by Andy's mom at the beginning of the film and immediately zeroes in on Woody, a toy he has been trying to find for years, as the final piece needed to complete the full set of Woody's Roundup characters he has been collecting, a set which he then plans to sell to the Konishi Toy Museum in Tokyo, if you ever are asked that in trivia.
That's in Japan!
Now, when Woody meets the rest of his gang, Jesse, Bullseye, and Stinky Pete, they show him his old TV show, Woody's Roundup, the show for which all of them were manufactured as promotional tie-ins. According to official Disney/Pixar sources, in-universe Woody's Roundup aired for just 13 episodes in 1957, becoming for a brief time the #1 children's show on TV before being cancelled due to the growing interest in the space race and the cultural fervor surrounding it. This brief spike in popularity caused there to be, for a short period of time, extremely high demand for merchandise from the show of all kinds, but especially for official toy replicas of the marionette puppet figures used in the show. This means that this briefly produced and sold original line of Woody's Roundup memorabilia is about as rare as it gets when it comes to classic toys, and thus we can assume that a vintage Woody doll in mint condition would have had to have lived a very specific and somewhat sheltered life before it eventually finds its way into the hands of young Andy Davis. The picture is becoming much more clear about the type of person that would have had to have originally owned this Woody. But we still don't yet have any specific indication as to who exactly that might have been within Woody's extended family. Toy Story 3.
It's not my fault!
Bitácora espacial.
At the beginning of Toy Story 3, Andy is preparing to go off to college. We see that while he is 17 and getting ready to leave, his room hasn't changed all that much. However, if we look closely, there is one newly added detail to Andy's room that I believe may hold the key to the mystery we are investigating. As those of you already familiar with Pixar Easter eggs may know by this point, on Andy's corkboard, we see a postcard tucked away among many other papers hung up and saved. On this postcard, there are written the words, "We are having a swell time, wishing you were here." And it is signed by someone named Emma Jean. Now, the mystery of who Emma Jean is became something of a personal obsession for Jonathan Carlin over on Super Carlin Brothers, one of my favorite YouTube channels of all time, and he was eventually able to sit down with Pete Docter and ask him personally who Emma Jean was.
And it is signed from a girl named Emma Jean in both movies. Who is Emma Jean?
The explanation itself that he gave is personally plausible, even if most people in the Super Carlin Brothers comment section all kind of agreed that Doctor had most likely made the answer up on the spot to satisfy Jay's curiosity and reward his tenacious fandom. Now, who Emma Jean actually is kind of irrelevant to our discussion here, because I'm much less interested in who the card is from and more interested in who it is addressed to. Those of you familiar with this particular Easter egg will have already directed your eyes to the right side, where we can clearly see that the card was sent to Carl and Ellie Fredrickson from Up. That's right. Regardless of who Emma Jean is, whether she was Carl's brief girlfriend before Ellie, the explanation Pete Docter gave,
Emma Jean was a relationship that Carl had before his wife.
Oh my goodness.
or potentially Andy's mom, as theorized by many fans, or even the sister of both Ellie and Andy's mom, as theorized by yet more fans. Whether any or none of these theories on Emma Jean's identity are true, we do know exactly who Carl and Ellie Fredrickson are. And what this postcard serves to prove is that Andy and his mom, in some way, shape, or form, know Carl and Ellie. Not only do they know them, but Carl and Ellie are either close enough relatives or good enough family friends for 17-year-old Andy to have a postcard addressed to them specifically saved in his room alongside everything else important to him from his young life, perhaps even as a remembrance of the now passed away Ellie. Therefore, it is my belief that the original owner of Andy's Woody doll was none other than the lead of 2009's Up, Carl Fredrickson himself. Now we get to explaining the familial connection. Up.
Please let me in.
No.
Carl Fredrickson in canon was born in 1931. While in some ways he was rather a timid child, he grew up idolizing bravery, a sense of adventure, and those who possessed these traits, specifically his hero, the explorer Charles Muntz. He later goes on to meet Ellie, a young girl who is similarly in possession of a brash, adventurous spirit, and the two eventually grow up together and get married, possibly with an Emma Jean-shaped obstacle in the way at some point before the wedding, if Pete Docter is to be believed. Also from promotional art, we know that while Carl was an only child, Ellie has at least 2 siblings, both of whom I think are girls, if memory is to be believed, but at least one of them is a girl. Anyway, that doesn't really matter. She, at the very least, has siblings. That's all that's important. Remember that. So Ellie has siblings. However, the time period we are concerned with is the gap between their marriage and Ellie's death, aka their life together as a married couple. Since we know that Carl and Ellie get married in canon at 19 years old, they would have been together already for several years when the original Woody's Roundup TV show aired its 13 episodes in 1957. Given the sort of silly, playful, childlike, adventure-loving personalities that we know both Carl and Ellie shared, it's totally plausible and even quite likely that Woody's Roundup might have been an early favorite show of Carl and Ellie's, a fun activity for them to curl up together and enjoy after a long, hard day of work. This would be exactly the kind of light, fun program that both characters would have certainly gravitated toward, and so I could totally see Carl buying himself a Woody doll either during the show's run or after it was cancelled to remind himself of those happy evenings spent with his wife in front of the TV. However, if I am to theorize just a little farther, I actually imagine that it was in fact Ellie who originally bought the doll as a gift for Carl. If that is indeed the case, then that means that Andy's Woody doll could have started his journey as an anniversary present from Ellie to Carl, perhaps even with a note attached to it, bearing Woody's most famous catchphrase, "You've got a friend in me." Is this theory perhaps a little silly? Yes, it is. Is it also achingly, heart-wrenchingly romantic, adorable, and sweet? Also very much yes.
Are they all different species? Yes. Yes, they are.
Whether he was bought by Carl for himself, or for Ellie, or by Ellie for Carl, as I suspect, I firmly believe that Carl Fredricksen was the original owner or at least purchaser of the famous Woody doll we all love, and vice versa goes for Ellie herself. He and Ellie, as we know, never had children of their own, and so this Woody, purchased in adulthood, was not immediately passed down to any children, instead sitting on the Fredricksens' shelf or mantle, remaining unplayed with, but also remaining in pristine mint condition. We then simply wait long enough in Carl and Ellie's life until they are finally acquainted with Andy and his mother. This could have been a familial connection, such as the Fredricksens being grand aunt and uncle to the young boy, or perhaps they knew the Davises from church and maybe were godparents, or maybe they even lived next door to them at a certain point. However, given the previously discussed old family toy line, this would suggest that, if my suspicion is correct, Carl and Ellie would most likely have to be older members of Andy's extended family, probably on his mother's side, with Ellie potentially being Andy's mom's aunt, and Andy's mom being the child of one of Ellie's siblings that we see in this promotional art here. And if you'll follow me a little further, there is another character in Pixar who we know knows the Fredricksens, or at the very least Ellie, because we see Ellie's picture up here in the home of none other than Riley Anderson, the lead of the Inside Out films. And so, from this we can surmise that Ellie is the grand aunt of not only Andy Davis, but Riley Anderson, making Andy and Riley cousins, I believe. Yes, and both the children of Ellie's sibling. So there we are. He connected that all. I didn't have that in the script. I had to just kind of say that in the moment. And so that's how we know that the Fredricksens, the Davises, and the Andersons from the Up, Toy Story, and Inside Out films are all connected by literal family. Ha 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 ha.
Ah ha, give me that.
Similar to the identity of the mysterious Emma Jean, however, exactly the family connections by which they know Andy and his mother doesn't even matter, as the postcard from Toy Story 3 has already confirmed this personal connection to, in some way, exist. It then takes only the smallest bit of imagination to think that Carl, an older man with a soft spot for children but sadly none of his own, would eventually think to give, as a gift, one of his favorite old possessions, his cherished Woody doll, to a little boy in his life, whom Carl knows will put him to good use. And that, I believe, is the true origin of Andy's Woody doll. Woody was bought most likely in 1957, potentially by Ellie as a sentimentally symbolic anniversary gift for her husband Carl, who then kept him for decades as a favorite memento before finally giving him away as a gift one more time to a little boy in his life named Andy Davis.
You were correct. It's fact.
This also explains why, as old and vintage as Woody is, he doesn't remember having ever previously belonged to a kid. Because before Andy, he never had. Andy is his first kid.
Yes.
And that's my theory. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed this slightly different episode. I personally love the Pixar theory very much, and so this is my very first attempt to add to it myself by tackling the origin of one of the most key and celebrated characters in all of Pixar history. If this video does well, or maybe even if it doesn't, I'll be making some more Pixar theory videos in the future just as soon as I can think them up. Please do let me know what you think of this theory in the comments below, as the entire fun in something like the Pixar theory is the discussions it inspires among all of us, the fans. Yes, the next one I plan to do is how The Good Dinosaur is a secret sequel to WALL-E, so stay tuned for that. Thank you again so very much for watching, and if you're still here, good night, good luck, and
Buckle up, bonehead, because you're going for a ride. Ah!
哦。